everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. We're on a Friday. Not much to break down with the Fantasy Football Bible Part 2, just 5 games, but also I urge you to watch last night's absolute instant classic. Ravens 35, Bengals 34. The game went, I guess, other than necessarily the closest, went pretty close to what we talked about yesterday on the show with the fantasy players. Obviously, no one saw that big chase game going, but it did have him high up in the ranks this week. So wasn't the biggest shock to see him put up that high a week, but I guess you never expect that. But I had him as wide receiver too. And also had Zay Flowers lower than the consensus. Felt pretty good about the read there. So this is why this show is valuable. It tells you my point of view on players, and you can amass that with other people's point of views to get to the decisions you want to make. So that's why I do it. We've got 5 games to talk through. Let's talk through them. Chargers, Titans. Chargers are favored by 7 points in this one with an over and under 39. I think that's absolutely spot on. I think I can't think of a better line this week than that one. And really, as a result of this line, there just isn't that many relevant fantasy players in this one for sure. I look at this team. I look at the two teams here, and I think, the Chargers have been heavily functional. They've been really, really functional. And I think that we will start to see more of Justin Herbert come out as a result of this, especially in the passing game. We're starting to see more Ladd McConkey. We saw Quentin Johnston. Yeah, okay, there was a big play that amassed a huge amount of those yards last week. But I think that 1-2 tandem is starting to come alive. And that will start to see Justin Herbert's value go up. Not to mention that the Titans passing D, not one of the better ones in the NFL. So I do think that you will see a more stronger performance from this O on the Chargers than perhaps we expected. The Titans, I think it's going to be rough sledding. As for the quarterbacks in this one, I actually have Justin Herbert at 9 this week. I think this is a good matchup for him. As for quarterback, it's not entirely decided which way they're going to go yet. But either way, I'm not starting either one. Mason Rudolph is 27th in my ranks. That's where I kind of think they're going to go. But I have Levis at 29 because I'd expect him to come into this game. If Levis gets the start, he'll probably be around about 22, 23, 24, that sort of range. That's kind of where I have them sitting in this one. Let's talk about the running backs, both fantasy relevant in this one. J.K. Dobbins having a really, really good season. He is my running back 11 this week. Tony Pollard does have a questionable tag. I do expect him to go based on all the latest information, but do check those designations. He is at 16 this week in my ranks. Calvin Ridley is up there in 17. I do think the Titans will try and chase it, and with not many receiving options on this team, Ridley should see a bunch of targets. Ladd McConkey is at 18, Quentin Johnston at 20, so I do have 3 wide receivers here in this one. And Nick Westbrook-Akeen is a really good outside shot to be fantasy relevant. I've got him at 34 in my ranks. That makes him flex worthy. He did score a touchdown last week. He is a player I will be keeping an eye on over the coming weeks. He's a player that definitely people should be acquiring. So he is there in my ranks as a flex worthy start, and is definitely someone that you could start in a tight spot. Moving on to the tight ends, there really isn't any tight end discussion here. Will Disley's at 16. If you're desperate for a start in this sitch, then that's where you need to go. Don't need to start Chigaquanku. He's all the way down in the 20s. But the Los Angeles Chargers are my favorite DST of the week. They are my DST1. I think this is a really good matchup for them. There's turnovers galore, lack of yards, lack of points from Tennessee. So do get involved there. Cameron Dicker is my kicker 4. He can also be taken to the bank on this one. Next game, Cowboys, Eagles. Eagles favored by 7.5 over under 43.5. I think that over under's a little low. I think you can hit the over on that quite easily. I can make a case. and they've probably overcompensated for Cooper Rush coming in. I don't think Cooper Rush is a starting level worthy quarterback in this league. I also think he's one of the better replacement quarterbacks in this league to come in. He is very similar to Dak Prescott in the way that he plays. He's played a number of games in this league in this system. So I think that it's slightly discounted how polished he is as a backup and how he can come in and do an okay job. I'm not sitting here saying that you've got to pick him up and he's super fantasy relevant, but I also don't think he's going to be the worst quarterback that we'll see on display this weekend. And I do think that they will score points. It's just a question of how many, but I do expect the Eagles to win this and win this comfortably. And all the game script will nod to that. And in fact, that game script, I think, really hurt Devonta Smith this week because I think they'll run the football. I think they'll use Saquon Barkley on the back of what he's been doing lately. I think they're going to target A.J. Brown heavily because he looks like he's good to go in this one because he has a heavy plus matchup. Devonta Smith has a really bad matchup from a wide receiver cornerback perspective. He's up against Cooper DeJean even, and I don't like that. I don't like that matchup at all. I don't think it's one that they'll play to particularly strongly. And so I just see Devonta Smith having a bit of a drop back from what we have seen lately. Play some caution on him. The rest of that Eagles offense will be fine, as narrow as it is. As for the Cowboys, it is going to be very much a case of get the ball to CeeDee Lamb if he's available as much as you can. That is effectively what we will see. I expect him to see some running routes if he's fit. I expect him to probably get some end arounds, probably get some screens. I expect him to get the ball quite significantly in this one. And I actually think that Rico Dowdle takes a bit of hit due to the game script in this one as they'll be chasing the game. Where I have these quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts is my quarterback 5 this week. I do think they'll take some of the work off him in the fourth quarter if they are winning this quite handily. Cooper Rush is at 25. I think in a Superflex you can start him. I think he's worthy of that place. But again, only in a Superflex. If we look at the running backs in this game, Saquon Barkley is at 3. I think he'll have a good week. Rico Dowdle is down at 25. So outside the top 24, it's not a knock on Dowdle. I think it's more the game script in this one. This game will get away from them quite quickly. As for the receivers here, at this point, I don't have CeeDee Lamb in my rankings. And the reason why is it's definitely far from a sure thing that he does play. There is a good chance. He was limited in practice this week. There is a chance. At this point, he's not in there, and I guess it's just me being cautious with the ranks I submitted last night. But having said that, if he does come in, I think because of the heavy targets, he'll probably slot in around about wide receiver 5. That's kind of where I think he's going to go. But I'm not ready to put him in just yet. But I think if he is, based on what I said, I do think he'll be targeted quite heavily. So my leading wide receiver in this one is A.J. Brown. I've got him actually at wide receiver 8. I think he's a player that will go really strong in this one. I do think he'll get the ball regularly and will do quite a lot with it. Jalen Tolbert is my leading Dallas receiver. He's at 28 right now. Devonta Smith is at 30 in this one, and he has got a questionable tag as well, one to keep an eye on. Don't be too surprised if I slip him outside the top 36 based on matchup. I am a little concerned with this matchup and game script that it won't go his way. So I'm kind of hanging on to the fact that he could be outside of that flex-worthy range and be, well, it's still flex-worthy at 37, depending on where you've got players and sort of how many you've got on your team and how many you start. But he's a player I definitely don't think he's in the must start column this week. Tight ends this week. It's going to be a really interesting one to see what they do with Jake Ferguson. I have him arrowed down this week, and I think it's purely because I just want to see what happens. I will say this: if CeeDee Lamb is out, Jake Ferguson will rise pretty quickly. He'll probably be around tight end 6 for me, maybe even higher than that. I've got to have a think about where he goes, but it'll be somewhere either 4 or 6 will be where he goes in my ranks this week. So he's definitely one to down to watch. As for as for Dallas Goedert, he is good to go. He is my tight end 12 this week. I had him outside of that, but then seeing that he is a full go, he is someone that I have in my ranks in that position. Moving on to the DSTs, Philly will be high up here. They're at 3. Not starting Dallas this week. Definitely not a good move. As for the kickers, I have Brandon Aubrey at 9. Just to get a little lower, I think they'll score points. I just don't think they'll score as many points as they would normally. Jake Elliott is at 12. You could definitely start him in this one. Right, moving on to the last game of the late slate. It's Cardinals versus Jets. Jets favored by 2, and I don't hate this one for a change. I think that is about right. But the Cardinals are very Jekyll and Hyde, so it's hard to tell what you're going to get. Over under 46.5. That's punchy. Not sure I see that one. I do think that the Jets can nullify the Cardinals. I can see them holding them to under 20 points. I don't see the Jets scoring many more than 24, 26 points. I think the line's close. My gut tells me it's probably going to lean on the under, but I do think this Jets offense will be better this week, and it seems to be getting better from strength to strength. What I will say about this is you can ignore absolutely everybody that isn't Garrett Wilson or Davante Adams from a receiving side. No one else is getting targets. No one got more than 2 targets last week, as I said on the show earlier in the week. So you can just stay away from all of those. So it's a really narrow tree of what's going on in New York right now. And then when it comes to talking about Arizona, that offense isn't quite flowing the way it should do. And I think this is a really bad week for that offense. Moving into the quarterbacks here this week, I think it's going to be interesting to see what we do with Kyler Murray. I find him probably the hardest quarterback to rank right now. He's at 17. I think he's susceptible to turnovers, and this defense will really exploit them. Aaron Rodgers is at 20. I think as much as those two will carry water and carry a huge amount of weight with no movement on the legs and no scrambling, I don't think it's going to be a highly huge offensive game with in terms of yardage and touchdowns. Running backs this week, I do have Breece Hall down at 19. He's just not getting the usage as much as we would like out of him. James Conner does carry a questionable tag. I expect him to be good to go. He is at 20. I think he'll find this one really tough, and the game script will go against him fairly quickly. We look at the receivers here, and there's really not many to talk about in this one. Davante Adams is at 5. Garrett Wilson is at 13. As I said, if CeeDee Lamb comes back, Davante Adams will move down the slot. That's kind of where I have it. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. at 50. He has got a terrible receiving assignment this week, and against this defense, I want no part of it. The only receiver I trust here is Trey McBride of Arizona. He's at 7. He will see a bit of a nudge down, but he'll still be a decent bet to start this week. Just don't expect the same volumes that you've perhaps got accustomed to with owning him. The Jets are my DST 7. And I don't think there's any strong need to start the kickers in this one. Chad Ryland's kind of an outside bet. He's at 18, but that is as fast as it gets for the Arizona Cardinals. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, it's the Texans v. the Lions. This will be a great game. Lions favored by 3.5, over under 48.5. I think both are soft. I think you can get over 48.5 pretty easily. There's an easy pathway to that happening. And I think the Lions will win by more than 3.5. I'd argue that up there with the Ravens, and then you have to say the Chiefs because they're undefeated. They're the best teams in football right now. And I think that the Texans just haven't quite got it into gear this year as much as their record suggests. I do think it's going to be an interesting one, but I do think that the Detroit Lions will pressure from beginning to end. They'll be in front for the good majority of this. I think Houston will be playing catch-up. The big question is, will Nico Collins go? At the moment, he's not in my ranks. That is one to definitely keep an eye on. CJ Stroud, he is my quarterback 11 this week. I do think he'll be chasing. I think we'll see a better week from CJ Stroud this week than we have seen for most of the season from a fantasy perspective. Jared Goff is at 14, really solid, really reliable, very low ceiling, but very high floor. He's not going to let you down this week. Famous last words from me. Joe Mixon is at 8. I think he's a real central part to this offense, and I think you're going to see him get a good amount of workload here. I have Gibbs and Montgomery at 23 and 24. His Houston D, especially against the run, is pretty solid. I think you're going to see them get a good amount of usage, but I think they're going to be rotated out. I think you're going to see Gibbs get a lot of work between the 20s. I think you're going to see Montgomery get a lot more work inside the 20. It's how much work he gets inside the 20. It's why they're both start plays, both have upside, but they're both, for me, have a slightly lower ceiling this week. What I will say in a PPR, Jahmyr Gibbs is far more attractive than wide receiver 23. This is ranked on half point PPR. Moving on to the receivers here. And of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown, a staple wide receiver 1. He's at 10 this week. Tank Dell is at 14. Purely, I think, on volume, he has slightly disappointed. Jameson Williams back from suspension. Hard one to rank this week. He's at 42. But he has always got a big, big ceiling. So I really like him to be added to rosters this week. And I think you can take advantage of that. They're the only 3 here. As for the tight ends this week, they're fringe tight end plays. I actually do not like Sam Laporta this week as a result of that. I actually have Sam Laporta all the way down at 22. I think this is a real big trap game for him, and I'm not loving that. Dalton Schultz is at 14. I think there are better options out there. DSTs, I think this is a high-scoring game, so I have the lines at 9. But again, I could make a case to start a different DST here, especially as they don't really turn the ball over Houston quite that much, except for maybe a few fumbles here and there. As for the kickers, Kaimi Fairbairn, he's at 5. Jake Bates is at 11. As in a high-scoring game, you would expect these kickers to be very, very important. Moving on to Monday Night Football. Last game of the week, Rams-Dolphins. Gamblers out there can't make their minds on this one. They have the Rams favored by 1, over under 50.5. And it's a strange one. Both of these teams have really suffered by injuries. We actually don't really know what either of these teams are. Ian made a really good point that he thinks that on Tuesday's podcast that the Tua is kind of playing within himself, and the scheme is set for him to be perhaps within himself a little bit. So it's a really interesting point as well. I hadn't really considered too much, but it is looking like that the wide receivers aren't getting too much play, and maybe they'll open up a bit more as the weeks go on. Here's hoping for that. The Rams are starting to hit their stride. Demarcus Robinson is someone who is still continuing to produce even with players coming back. With these ones, I think this is going to be a decent game. Over under 50.5 seems like a really good line. Probably overs in play here. But yeah, it could go either way. So I like this as a line and as a game to watch, and it should be a really good game. Tua is my quarterback 13 this week. Matt Stafford, my quarterback 15. Both viable, both happy to start them. It'll be interesting to see what they do this week. This is a good test for both teams. Kyron Williams is my running back 2. Devon Achane, my running back 10, both heavily viable. Raheem Mostert, running back 32. I do like him, and I actually think he is looking pretty good right now. But I'm just worried the volume here and the game script in particular could go against them if the Rams get up early. Puka Nacua is my wide receiver 4. Tyreek Hill, my wide receiver 9. Cooper Kupp is my wide receiver 16. They're the main 3. Demarcus Robinson is up there, though. He is at 29. He is questionable, but I expect him to go. He is one I would be picking up and playing in most contests and feel pretty good about that one. Jonnu Smith is tight end 9. Don't need to worry about Colby Parkinson. This one, he is pretty much dropped off the face of the earth. It's not one to necessarily worry about. The Rams are 15 DST. They're kind of in play here, but I think you'd be brave to definitely go with that. Again, Miami don't turn the ball over tons, so it is a bit brave, but I think they'll be solid. I do think that the Rams will win this game. That's kind of where my impression is, but I do think it'll be close. As for kickers here, if you're looking for a particular kicker, Jason Sanders is the one I would go with. He's at kicker 8. No need to start Josh Carty. That's going to do it for the Bible. That should do it for the week's planning. I am planning to get back with one more pod this week just to talk about some potential with the trade deadline, fantasy trade deadlines coming up, some potential buy lows and sell highs, and some potential trade ideas that you can get across the line. So I will be dropping that relatively shortly. So keep an eye on that if I can get it out. That is the initial plan. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.